Hello YouTube, my name is Zach, and today I'm going to be analyzing Anneke Van Giersbergen. I tried. I hope that's right. In America, we'd probably just say Anneke Van Giersbergen, but I tried, so give me a break. And today I'm going to be taking things from a little bit of a different approach, and I just want to go ahead and get right to it. I don't want to spend too much time with an introduction. A quick disclaimer to those of you who've never seen my content. This video is made strictly for educational purposes. This is not a reaction video. I've already thoroughly analyzed Anneke prior to this recording. I'm a professional voice teacher at a music studio in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've taught hundreds of voices, both male and female, in most genres from the ages of 5 to 60. I base my analyses upon academically sourced, health-based principles. If you want to learn a bit more about the basis of my pedagogy, I encourage you to check out nats.org and peruse the Journal of Singing. It's been the authoritative source of all things vocal pedagogy related in the United States for the last 75 years. Artistry and technique are equally important in singing, and throughout my research of the YouTube landscape, I've found that there's a much greater emphasis on artistry across the board than technique, and I aim to counterbalance that with some more objective commentary. As such, my videos tend to de-emphasize the artistic intention of the singer. My doing so does not invalidate the singer's skill or efficacy in displaying his or her artistic ideals, but perhaps instead offers a different lens by which to view the process of singing and phonation. As a result, this video will contain both praise and constructive criticism. So I humbly encourage you to view these critiques from a strictly educational paradigm and not as an affront on Anneke herself. My goal ultimately is to help you learn about your own singing. Another thing that I want to do in this video that I haven't done before is I want to upfront give you some positives and negatives of Anneke's voice so that you kind of know what to expect from the analysis and I don't have to spend so much time pointing each thing out painstakingly. I can kind of overview it a little bit more. The three biggest strengths of Anneke's voice are: 1, she has excellent breath support and generally good control and placement across the range. She has a very good sense of legato and a general sense of connectedness from pitch to pitch, and she has very good navigation of the passaggio up into the head voice. And a few inconsistencies or weaknesses that she has would be: 1, she has some inconsistent vibrato, which sometimes it's a little more forced than others. She has a slight tendency for resonance to be placed a little further forward at times than it's needed to be. And the third one is that she has an accent that sometimes causes her to sing words by placing sounds on phonated consonants rather than on vowels. This is on most surfaces from The Gathering, but she's actually covering it with one of her newer bands. Maybe they're called Viewer. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can tell me how to pronounce in the comments. And by the way, last thing before we start, I know the video is going to be chopped up. There's nothing I can do. The copyright algorithm, the fair use stuff is extremely complicated. And if I play more than 10 seconds of content at once, then my video will either be blocked or it'll be banned or I'll get a copyright strike. And at worst case scenario, my channel could even be taken down if it happens too much. So I don't want to rock the boat too much. I apologize that it messes up the flow of the song. If I had a way to control it, I would. With that out of the way, let's get started. Here we go. So there's so much to say already about that first, I guess, phrase or sequence or whatever you would call it. When I was coming up with the negative parts of Anneke's singing, it was kind of hard to do because she does a lot of things extremely, extremely well. And her voice has a very distinctive timbre and quality. And I think by over-analyzing the approach to her timbre too much, it might take away from what she's trying to create as a singer. There is a lot to look at here, though. One thing that I want to point out is that her breath support is spectacular, and the way that you know this is by listening to the phrasing. Not only are the phrases consistent in the tone, in the timbre of the sound, and you keep this evenness, and you don't hear a lot of breathiness come through, or you don't hear a lot of push. Everything just stays very even. You also hear the phrases lasting a very, very long time. There's actually quite a bit of misconception of people thinking things like if you can hold your breath for a long time, you can hold out phrases for a long time. That's not all entirely true, because every time you speak or you sing, you're doing different things like plosives, which use different amounts of air, or you'll change vowels, which may use different amounts of air. I mean, things change when you're speaking than just holding your breath. So my point in that is to say that the fact that she can carry a phrase through as long as she can with the amount of tonal consistency and without having to take a breath, as she demonstrated in this little snippet, it's remarkable, and it shows that he has an excellent amount of breath support and control. You hear the breath support concept a lot, but really what it boils down to is that there's solid muscular engagement at the diaphragm and below, and her whole body is supporting her in her singing. So what it effectively does is it allows the diaphragm to contract more slowly. And when that happens, air is distributed more evenly, not as much comes out all at once. And when there's less air coming out through the process of phonation, the longer you can hold your phrases. You have to think about it like every time you'd say p or k, anytime you'd make a plosive, using consonants like that, there's an extra expulsion of air that comes out. So it stands to reason that you have to be able to balance out utilizing vowels in conjunction with the amount of air exertion and expulsion that happens with consonants to be able to effectively navigate a phrase. And the fact that she's able to do that and carry out a phrase for, probably 8 or 9 seconds without a breath is a testament to her ability to do all those things. One little tiny nitpick that I want to point out, that's not a huge deal, is so small of an issue that I didn't even include on my little list, is that you see her forehead kind of close in like this. Usually, most of the time, that's a sign of a little bit of like forehead tension. Not the end of the world, not destructive to the voice. It's a little bit too much work. You just don't need to make that kind of like close your face up kind of thing. Now, if that motion were accompanied by something tonal that made me think that there was push coming, then I'd say it's a much bigger issue. Actually, after having talked to some other professional singers and getting some of their perspectives on it, it's kind of hard not to sing some of these styles without having a little bit of facial engagement. And philosophically, I'm opposed to that just because my background is in bel canto and classical, and we talk about lack of tension and freedom. But there is a certain amount of concession that I think must be made for this paradigm and this style to be able to account for the fact that you're going to be a little bit tense. I mean, it's metal. It's not you're not singing about roses and flowers most of the time, so it's going to be a little more aggressive. You might have to use a little bit more tension. Not the end of the world as long as it doesn't start impeding upon the phonation and the process of singing. In Anneke's case, it's clearly not.
These are blowing winds and I cannot sing.
So there's just a lot of exceptional work going on here. Not only is her tonality is consistent, she has a nice, even sense of resonance throughout the sound, meaning that it's on the voice. There's not too much air going through it. It doesn't sound like she's pushing. It all sounds like her singing sound is extremely natural. She's not using a lot of effort to create a specific sound. One thing that's really worth pointing out is when she moves up into her head voice, you can hear that like flip. It kind of sounds like a flip from the chest voice into head voice. She navigates that about as well as any female singer in this genre that I've ever heard. So, it's not a classical sound per se, but the way that she navigates into that is exceptional. And typically when I work with female students and we start talking about the head voice, the passaggio, moving up into the upper range, women don't typically have as much trouble moving into the head voice. A lot of times the trouble comes when you want to make the range blend between the chest voice and head voice, kind of making them come together. And in doing so, what happens is you tend to have some girl singers who maybe take the chest voice up too high, or they take the head voice down too low, or something along those lines where there's a point in the range where it all ends up being very uneven and inconsistent. In Anneke's case, it's clear that she knows exactly where in her voice to move up into her head voice and where to move back down out of it. And I do think that she uses her head voice to kind of provide a different vocal color. I don't think that she's necessarily trying to hang out up in her head voice too much when she sings, but rather when she wants to make the head voice sound, she jumps up and then jumps back out of it. But I also don't get the impression that she's willing to take her chest voice up a whole lot higher than her voice wants to go anyway. And if this is true, if my little theory here is true, then it shows that part of the reason that she's had such a successful career is that she's been mindful of these things. I mean, this is a somewhat recent video, and Anneke is around her mid-40s now, I think. I think in this video she may have been like 43. And for women in particular, that's an age where you start seeing some major changes and sometimes even declines in women's voices. And there's a lot of biology behind that. And, women go through a lot of hormonal changes and things that can really negatively affect the way that they phonate. And one of the first things that I find is kind of goes when this happens is the head voice. You tend to find that in a lot of cases, women's head voices kind of fall off a bit as they age, but not in this case. In this case, her head voice is still wonderful. She navigates it very, very well. So that's definitely worth some praise. One thing to point out here as well, going back to the things that I mentioned at the beginning, I made this mistake with Floor Jansen. I don't know enough about this area of the world to be able to say exactly what accent this is or exactly, how vowels are pronounced in this region of the world. So I don't want to specifically, talk about the vowel itself, but I do want to say that on the word winters, she uses a hard R, which means that she goes winter, r. You can hear that. Let me go back and play it for you.
These are blurry winter.
So you hear that r kind of sound. That is a hard R. And a hard R is whenever the sound of the R consonant carries into the phonation. Well, now, this is not something to stop the presses over. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal, but this is what happens when a singer's really good. You have to kind of get really nitpicky about these things. When you sing using vowels most of the time. It's just like when you speak, you don't sit on a singular consonant for very long. Most of the time you're bouncing from consonant to consonant and the vowels connect the sound together throughout the phrase that you're speaking. So the voice is very naturally attuned to utilizing vowels to create sound. So the efficiency of the process of phonating can be disrupted when you lean on a singular consonant for too long. So when she goes winter, is not a vowel. Is a vowel. Is a vowel. Is not. Other examples of hard consonants could be n, z. Anything that's voiced, any consonant that can make a voice sound along with it tends to have the same issues. Typically, you can't hold a voice consonant without creating some form of tension in the mouth. If I go and I put my fingers underneath my jaw, I could feel a little bit of tightness start to well up down here. And so usually when you use hard consonants like that in singing, you create some form of tension in the face. So again, this is super, super nitpicky. I mean, when someone's good, I gotta critique something, right? So it's super picky. Anyway, let's move on.
When the sun comes, I hid with my shadow.
Okay, so there, when you hear the with my shadow, this is where I'm going to point out the whole vibrato thing. You heard with my shadow, and in the vibrato, you heard this oh kind of thing. Some forms of vibrato are incidental, or they're byproducts of full chord closure and this oscillation that occurs when the folds fully close. Those are typically considered to be like the most healthy because it's something that the voice just sort of does when everything's configured in a natural way. There are multiple other vibrato types, and if you've ever seen any of my videos before, you know that I've pointed out some of those. Like some of the different types of vibrato will be like the gospel jaw vibrato, where you'll see like people shake their head or nod their jaw to create a vibrato sound. There's like the laryngeal vibrato where people will like move their larynx up and down. I can't really do it very well because I haven't trained myself to do it, but you make your larynx move up and down to create this wobbly sound. There's the diaphragmatic vibrato where people go to kind of make this like fake shake kind of sound. And then there's this very like fluttery kind of I can't begin to do this at all, but it's this very fluttery vibrato. There's all sorts of things that people have done to try to create a vibrato sound. So in this case, what you're hearing is a little bit of that diaphragmatic vibrato. You're hearing kind of a sort of sound in the vibrato. What that means is that from down below where you have your breath support, she's kind of pulsating where her, underneath her lungs. So I'm doing that right now, and I can feel my lungs and my diaphragm moving up. And it's not to point out that it's destructive or anything like that. It's just not natural. There are more efficient, natural ways of creating vibrato, and usually what happens when you use vibrato like that is that The diaphragm has to engage more. Everything involving the closure of the lungs has to engage more. And those are muscles too, and those muscles can tire out. So as you do the diaphragmatic vibrato, you can even hear if I'm doing it, like the vibrato is kind of inconsistent in its waveform. And it's really just because there are muscles that are causing it to happen. Whereas if I went, if I just do a single note and I have a vibrato that has like even consistency from chord closure, the waveform has like this almost rhythm to it that it stays consistent no matter how long I hold the note. Making those manufactured vibratos is not going to destroy your voice most of the time. In this case, it certainly won't, but it does tire you out more easily. And if you want to create a vibrato sound, it's typically better to just figure out how to get full chord closure and let the oscillation happen on its own. There are some singers who can't create vibrato at all. And, you know, usually you find those types of singers moving into, like in the classical sense, they move into more like Renaissance music where you sing in a concert hall and, you know, you want there to be no vibrato because the vibrato is hard to hear throughout the acoustics of the room, that kind of thing. You also hear non-vibrato singers in a lot of rock music. If you know, some people just don't have it. I'll tell you this, if your voice does naturally want to vibrate and you straighten the tone out on purpose, that does end up being destructive to your voice in the long run. And I don't think that Anneke's doing anything like that at all here. And I don't think that what she's doing is vastly detrimental to her sound. And there are times here where she does use a natural vibrato, and I'll try to point it out if I see it. Yeah, she's really got some like really beautiful tones she produces, doesn't she? Like even for being like rock music, you know, you typically don't think of a singing sound being beautiful. But I guess the best way you could describe her tone would be to be very elegant, despite the fact that it's aggressive. It's kind of hard to categorize or classify her as a singer. I certainly would not call her an outright soprano. Maybe mezzo-ish. It's kind of hard to tell for what she's doing, but it certainly goes without saying that she has some really incredible vocal sounds that she produces, and it's very distinctive. Like you recognize her voice anywhere. I mean, anything that pops up where I hear her voice, like I immediately, hey, that's Anneke. I know, like you just know. She's done such a great job of refining her voice, refining her instrument to where it is uniquely and distinctively her own. And so, if anything, that alludes more to the idea that I preached at for all this time, that you want to stay true to your own voice. If you try to branch off and sound like someone else and not stick to what your voice wants to do on its own, you're probably going to have more vocal issues. You'll sound like a phony. But see, when I hear Anneke, all I hear is like a genuine, true to herself vocal sound. I've made this analogy a million times, but it's the same reason that you can tell 10 of your friends to go behind a door and get them all to say hello, and you can say distinctly who they are just by listening to their voices. The voice has such a unique quality when it operates naturally that it's completely distinctive. We all have a different size of mechanism. We all have different sizes of individual muscles within it. Everything is configured a little bit differently. Everyone's folds are different sizes and shapes and lengths and things. So when you just allow your voice to be what it is without trying to manufacture sounds too much, it comes out like Anneke's does. I mean, it's just very natural, very true to her, and it's really admirable. I wish more singers did this more often. It's really nice. So yeah, her moving that octave up on I tear, the words I tear, was just exquisite. I mean, that ability to just jump from the low to the high with that degree of consistency, perfect intonation. I mean, it's great. And in case you didn't know this video was hand filmed from the audience. This is not a professionally made video. And part of the reason that I choose videos like this is because they typically aren't edited. So you can really hear the singer's capabilities. Some people give me flack for that sometimes because I choose videos that aren't of the highest like recording quality. But this gives you the truest indicator of how the person sings. And when you hear an octave interval like that done so gracefully and easily, it just shows her level of skill and her level of control. That's very hard. See, even me, like I tried to do it and it wasn't exactly all like when I did that motion up. It's hard. Being able to make huge intervallic motions like that is very difficult. And especially when you're changing through registers. So she did that there. One of the points of my three good things at the beginning that I did was like great control of her head voice, moving through that passaggio. It was excellent. I mean, it was right on pitch. And just an octave interval like that can show how much control and how well attuned to one's own voice someone is. So really, really, really nice there. Good stuff. So what I just heard was a good example of me referring to the whole like placement thing being a little too far forward sometimes. The phrase that she sung is "when I come," and so on the word "come," she kind of went "huh." She kind of put the sound in her nose a little bit, and what that did is you probably saw an edit there. I had to look at the text because I wasn't even sure what word that was, because the placement affected the sound of the vowel coming out. So when you talk about vowel placement, it's very important to understand that the idea here is that you want to make the vowel as close to the spoken sound as possible. So the word come, is the vowel you want to use. And so she kind of went, like she kind of did this nasal thing. Sometimes that's a byproduct of this whole like mask concept, and women especially are told to do this in contemporary music, sing in the mask. And what that really does is it gets you that really bright forward sort of sound. It keeps the tone, it keeps the resonance from being too dark, too operatic, whatever, however you want to call it. So you get a lot of girls using this mask technique, but one of the negative things that can happen as a byproduct of it is that it can shift from being bright, very bright vowel, to being very bright, and then the nose, kind of like that. And so nasal resonance, as I've discussed before, isn't the end of the world in terms of like vocal health, but a lot of times nasal resonance is indicative of other issues. In this particular case, Anneke's voice is not doing anything unhealthy. And that's what I was referring to when I made my little list at the beginning, is that sometimes her placement causes her resonance just to be a little bit more forward than is like, I guess perfect, so to speak. It does not intrude upon the intonation. It doesn't make it unpleasing to listen to. Nothing like that. It's just a nitpicky technical thing that's worth pointing out. And remember that whole argument comes from the paradigm of making the vowel match what you would naturally speak when you say the word. Yeah, so there the word burst, you heard that same hard R thing. The vibrato kind of like stiffens up when you use an vowel. So typically I recommend for people just to sing on a vowel, bust, almost give it that British sound, I bust out kind of thing, rather than going I burst. If you do plan on using that R consonant, put it at the very end, like I burst at the very end. But even I'm not a big fan of doing that. I would prefer just I bust out, almost just an vowel. But, again, this is just one of those things that's a preference sort of deal. Most of the critiques of her singing that I'm doing are more preferential than, strictly like gonna cause you vocal damage or injury or anything like that. So one thing that was interesting to point out there is, again, like I feel like a broken record if I just keep repeating all the things she's doing well. Excellent support, excellent consistency of tone, fantastic movement into the head voice, all those. I could just keep repeating myself over and over again, and then you guys won't learn anything, will you, right? So I do want to point out here, though, is that there was a slight decay in her ability to move into her head voice more easily. And the difference here between what she was doing at the beginning of the song is that when she was singing the word wakes me, she had her embouchure much wider. And so when that embouchure is wider, all the muscles in the face engage more, which restricts the mechanism. And so in women in particular, it's very important that women have freedom when they move into the head voice, because you need that soft palate to raise easily. And when the muscles in the front of the face are very tight, like when you make this kind of face, the soft palate does not raise as easily. So when she moves into that head voice, if you listen again, the motion up into the passaggio and past it was a little bit more stilted. It sounded a little bit more stiffer. Now, this is a lot more nuanced than, a singer that can't do this at all. But again, like, she's really good. You got to be nitpicky, right? Let me go back and play it for you again so you can hear it. You hear how the E vowel, when it moves up into the head voice, it just doesn't quite have that grace and elegance. It's just a little bit more like bup, bup. It doesn't have that legato, that connectedness. It's probably because her embouchure was so wide and she had that like the tension around her lips. That's my guess. It's very common when you have like the teeth showing embouchure super wide. It's very common for the voice to sound a little bit stiffer. So just a quick commentary. You typically don't need to go all out with exposing your teeth to be able to sing something. Now, if she were trying to express herself somehow with her facial expressions, I mean, that's one thing, and it wasn't enough to make the sound not pleasant. It wasn't enough to make it unlistenable or out of tune or anything like that. Like nothing like that. We're talking about the good analogy I like to use with my students is like if you're an archer and you're trying to aim at the bullseye, like the better you get at shooting, the closer you're going to get to the bullseye, so the target becomes smaller. We're talking about a circle that's about that big that she's trying to aim at for the like middle of the bullseye. So not the end of the world, no huge deal, just something worth mentioning for those of you who kind of want to understand better how it works.
These are blurry winters, and I cannot tell.
Yeah, so that head voice, she didn't have as wide. It was still kind of wide, but it wasn't as wide, and her teeth weren't like completely exposed, that kind of thing, and it navigated up into the head voice a little more easily. So that's a good comparison. If you go back and play the last one to that one, you'll hear that motion into the head voice is a little more fluid. And so really, that's it. I really enjoyed that song. It was cool. I'd never heard it before someone recommended it to me. I liked it a lot. It was fun to listen to. I'm going to give an actual opinion. Like, this is my opinion, not backed by science, not backed by anything. I'm going to give an opinion on what I think. I think Anneke is the best female singer in rock music right now. It's my opinion. Don't kill me over it. I think she's fantastic. So, you know, the reasons I like her singing so much is the consistency and her tonality, the very distinctive tone. There's something about it that just rings very well, and so she's got a certain brightness in her timbre, and she's got a certain a color in her sound that makes her really stand out to me. It's just pleasing to listen to, but there's something about it that also makes it sort of fit the genre as well. You go back to like when I talked about, Tarja from Nightwish. Oh boy, I don't want to open up that can of worms again. You know, when I talk about her singing sound, I thought that she was an excellent technical singer, and I thought that she navigated her voice extremely technically proficiently, but I wasn't as big of a fan on her voice in a rock setting as I might be another female singer. Well, Anneke, definitely, I think that her voice is kind of like that perfect sweet spot of technical proficiency, consistency, timbre, sound quality, and fitting the music. So I really, really like what she brings to the table. I really like what she has to offer. And I haven't heard anything that she's done where I've just been like, ugh, I don't want to listen to her voice. It's really nice stuff. So good on her. And so that's it. I hope you all enjoyed this. I do offer voice lessons, and I have a booking client down in the description. I'll leave it in the comments. Please feel free to follow me on Instagram at Zach Ansley Vocals. I will put a link in the description to that as well. I also have a Patreon, and my Patreon link is in the comments in the description. Please please subscribe if you enjoyed this content for more of it. I'm like this close to breaching the 2,000 subscriber barrier, and I can't believe it. It's amazing to be able to make content for you all, and I really appreciate your willingness to hear me out and hear what I have to say. Please let me know of any feedback you might have. If you like the disclaimer that I put at the beginning, let me know. If you don't, if you like having the 3 points of good and bad at the beginning, let me know. Feel free to give me your feedback, and I will see you all again soon. Thanks. Bye.